When I went into work this morning, Stacey and Robert were talking about it in the ticket office, theorising about why they'd jumped in front of the train. It's sad, but I'm aware of it happening one too many times now. They weren't the first, and they won't be the last. Well, I checked my emails, knowing exactly the sort of messages I was in for from head office. The press statement, the reminder of the protocol in terms of discussing the incident, and the usual entirely pointless message asking me to make sure that there are some Samaritans posters up and visible. Samaritans posters. When are they going to learn that a Samaritans poster isn't enough? Every time this happens, it always brings memories screaming back at me of the first time I was involved in such an incident, long before I was the station manager. We've been radioed that there was a wheelchair user on an incoming train that was getting off at our station. I walked onto the platform and I unlocked the ramp, ready for the train to pull in. And I just happened to be stood close to these two school kids. A boy and a girl. 14, 15 probably. I couldn't make out what was going on between them at first. I thought perhaps they were a couple, having a lover's tiff or something. But his behaviour was kind of weird. And she just stood there silently. Well, when the train pulled in, she ended up getting hit and dying. The lad disappeared, but I didn't have time to worry about him. Protocol kicked in. I just had to try and usher everyone back and off the platform. It was absolute pandemonium. Screaming, crying, shoving, pushing. When the police arrived, they asked for witnesses. So a bunch of people who I was pretty sure weren't stood anywhere near what had happened started to bombard the officers with their version of events. When I was asked if I'd seen anything, I said I hadn't. A few days after that, I heard that the police were asking senior staff about the possibility of the girl being pushed in front of the train. They were trying to implicate that lad who was there. I heard a short while after that they'd taken him in for questioning. I tagged along to the coroner's hearing with Brian, who was the driver of the train, and Rick, who was the station manager at the time. I think people thought I was a bit of a weirdo for wanting to go along, especially when, as far as they knew, I had absolutely nothing to do with it. Unfortunately, Rick thought I was enthusiastic to learn about proceedings and was there to support Brian. He'd split with his wife. As the coroner ruled that girl's death a suicide, I felt this overwhelming sense of relief wash over me. As I looked over at the family, they looked confused and sad and shocked. That relief was replaced by guilt, sheer guilt. Because I realised I was responsible for the emotional turmoil and confusion that not only they but that lad had been through since that girl had died. You see, I knew that boy was innocent. She ran and jumped. I saw it.
But I convinced myself that I hadn't seen or heard anything. I spent many sleepless nights worrying about that lad. He was clearly a piece of work. But I knew he didn't push her. And when I found out the police were trying to involve him in that way, I felt awful. Absolutely sick to my stomach. When I saw the lad and the girl on the platform, I honestly thought that he was just flirting with her to start with. She wasn't saying anything. She wasn't even making eye contact. I inched a bit closer and I could just about hear what he was saying to her. He kept going on about things he wanted to do to her. Like sexually explicit stuff, violent. And as he kept going on, I became more concerned. It was one of those situations where I didn't know whether to jump in or not. And a gentleman came and stood between us and the platform started to fill up. I kept my eye on the lad and the girl. I could see he was still talking to her, but I couldn't hear what he was saying anymore. But I could see that she'd started to cry. I felt like I should intervene, and I was just about to go over to them when I saw the train pulling in. Oh, there was a possibility that they weren't getting on the same train, so rather than risk escalating things, I waited to see. And if they were, my plan was to ask him to wait for the next train and give them some space. As the train pulled in, she ran. Almost like she was trying to get away from him. But she ran towards the train. And she leapt in front of it. And daft as it sounds, it all happened in slow motion. The look on her face. It was like this was her only way out, her only option. She was resigned to a life of harassment, or she could just end it all. Oh, when the police were appealing for witnesses, I knew I should have chipped in and given them my statement. I was stuck with this overwhelming fear that I'd be asked, accused almost, about why I didn't intervene. Why, when I saw her crying, didn't I go over there and do something? I had no reason to believe she'd jump, that's why. That didn't seem to justify it in my head. So it just seemed easier to say I saw nothing. Especially there were so many other people giving statements. I thought surely one of them at least must have seen what I saw. I didn't need to get involved. But then the whole situation with the police trying to implicate the lad happened. Well, clearly no one had seen what I saw. They were all likely looking down on their phones or having their own conversations. Not only had I not done anything to save the girl, but I now wasn't doing anything to save this lad from possibly being convicted of murder. It was eating me up. I'd gone too far down the path of claiming I hadn't seen anything. They'd want to know why I hadn't spoken up sooner or even at the time. To be honest, I didn't have a good enough answer about that. And all that time, the family were being given all these different contrasting stories. Well, I got the impression from the coroner's hearing that some of them were finding it easier to cling on to the idea that she'd been murdered rather than accept the fact that she was so unhappy she ended her life. And the lad, as I said, 14 or 15, I guess, he was accused of murdering the girl. He didn't have to go through that. Whether he was the scum of the earth or not, he didn't push her. The end result was the right one, but if I'd spoken up in the beginning, I could have saved that family and that lad so much pain and anguish and doubt in the ensuing months. Seeing the hurt, confused, emotionally drained faces of that girl's family at the coroner's hearing, that haunts me more than the image of the girl jumping. But anyway, I'll make sure the Samaritans posters are up, and I'll make sure that this one is resolved as quickly and truthfully as possible. That's the only thing I can do now.